any brilliant new ideas, but I do have an old one. Actually, it's a couple of thousand years old. It goes something like this. Do for others what you would have them do for you. A very simple idea that most of us overlook. Try it out. Let your kids see you practicing this thing that was named the Golden Rule. Most behavior is learned. Try teaching your kids by example. It's a step in the right direction.
You're listening to AM 1000 WCCD Radio, programming for the soul of the city. Welcome back to a second hour of Summer Nights right here on WCCD. I can assure you that you won't want to miss a second of what's coming up this hour. So keep it right here on AM 1000. Let's get right back to it with your host of Summer Nights here on WCCD. Here is Ricardo Johnson.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome back to the second hour of Summer Nights here on WCCD. It is the soul of the city. Tonight and all the rest of this week, which is, of course, tomorrow, that's it, we have Grace Cafe, and then next week we'll have Grace Cafe. So we want you to stay tuned, some interesting talk. So let's go right now to Grace Cafe.
I'm telling you,
That's Chris Rice. That's Chris Rice.
That 8 o'clock song is great. I'll come back 8 o'clock all the time because
Chris Rice from the
love
CD,
that.
Past the Edges. That's my job. I have to inform people.
That's right. You did your job. Thanks. When we left you off there, we were looking into the Hebrew word bara, trying to really pin it down because this is a critical word. Because a lot of argument has gone on over this Isaiah 45:7, where God has the audacity to say, "I create evil." Our question is, did he really mean that? Or did he mean to say, "I allow evil," as some scholars tell us? Well, we can look for ourselves, and that's what we're doing. We're in Young's Analytical Concordance on page 210, and I find out there that the word Isaiah used was bara. And this same Hebrew word is used again. And again, we can find out, we can really pinpoint the meaning here by tracing this word throughout Scripture. I love using a concordance because you can really be like a detective.
Yeah, and it's
fun.
Strong's number 1254.
Is that the page number or the word number?
No, that's a word number.
Okay, the word number in Strong's is 1254. Look up this word for yourself. We want you to look. We're not afraid for you to look behind the curtain here. We want you to, because this is going to show you that what we're saying here about God creating evil is correct. God can talk. He does know what he's saying. This same word was used in Genesis 1:1, and here's how it was used. Same word. In the beginning, God created bara, the heaven and the earth. Now, let's insert this theologian's idea that this word carries the meaning of I allowed it, or I permitted it. In the beginning, God permitted the heaven and the earth.
Don't work.
That doesn't work. In the beginning, God allowed. No, we all know that the earth came in by a declarative action of God. He spoke and it came into being. This same word, bara, is used in Isaiah 45:7. We have become detectives. He creates evil.
Maybe in Genesis he spoke the wrong word. He didn't mean to speak that word.
Yeah, okay. Where did you graduate? Where did you graduate from? Let's Genesis 1:7. See, this is fun. We're detectives. Genesis 1:7, the same word is used again. Remember what I told you, a word is defined by its context. This word, whatever definition we give this word, must fit every context. That's a rule. It must fit every context, and allows certainly does not fit the context of Genesis 1:1, and it doesn't fit the context of the next verse I'm going to give you, which is Genesis 1:7. In the King James Version, we read that God created man in his own image. Now, God allowed man in his own image? No, it's impossible. And this, we're pinpointing this word, and really, this is exciting because God has empowered us by his Spirit and by giving us these tools to be able to do this. Here is a killer verse because this is in the same context of our verse in Isaiah 45. This is Isaiah 45:12. 5 verses later, Isaiah uses the same word in the same context. He uses bara again. And he said this, God speaking through Isaiah, I have made the earth and created man upon it. Created, bara. 5 verses after our critical verse in Isaiah 45:7, he says, I have created man upon it. Now, try to fit allowed in there. If that's what they're telling us Isaiah 45:7 is, let's see if it fits the same word 5 verses later. I have made the earth and allowed man on it. It's like man's knocking on the door. Excuse me, can I come in? I guess I'll allow you on the earth. Where did the man come from? No, God created man. Now, this word does not change meaning in midstream here. You know? You can't say that, well, it means, we have to acknowledge that in Isaiah 45:12, certainly it's created there. In Genesis 1:7, obviously the meaning is created. In Genesis 1:1, we will never argue with you that God created. But in Isaiah 45:7, it's allowed. Folks, we're talking about a serious theological bias here. What I'm giving you this evening is proof. Proof that creates means exactly what it says. Creates. If anybody is going to argue with that, then I say they must have such a theological bias of not associating God with evil that they're not believing their very eyes. And this is the definition of create in Young's Analytical Concordance. Listen to this. This is on the same page, page 210. Creation is the work of God in bringing into existence. The work of God. To say that God allows evil, I picture God like on a fruit belt, you know, and there's oranges coming down the belt, and he lets some go through, he allows some, and he pulls others out. Where's the stuff coming from? If he's sitting at the belt allowing some things and disallowing others, where's the stuff coming from? But God is the source. And I read you from John 1:3 that apart from him, nothing that has come into being has come into being.
Right.
And it's so simple that a 5th grader, maybe even a 3rd grader, I think a kindergarten person could understand this. God created the earth. I get that. God created man. I get that. God created evil. I get that. But we got to train the kid out of that. See, we train the kid out of it. Children are so wise to believe what God says. God takes responsibility for this. And who did he call to his lap? He called the children to his lap. And he said that unless you become as children, you cannot see the kingdom of God. And we are children here, and we believe God. This is not hard. It's only hard if you have a theological bias. You know, there's this, a young girl came to my house one time. She was selling Bibles, and she was going to school at a Bible college. I'm not sure where, but she was selling these books to try to earn money for school, and I engaged her in a conversation, and this subject came up on evil, and she's probably sorry she stopped at my house.
No doubt.
But, yeah, the subject came up on evil, and I mentioned about God creating it, and I showed her the passage in Isaiah. She was such a cute little thing. She was of Ukrainian descent, I think, and she said, if this be true, the whole thing crashes down. I apologize to all Ukrainian people out there for my accent. If this is true, what you say, the whole thing crumbles down. What thing was she talking about? Her system of belief.
Of theology.
Her system that she's learning in the school.
Man-made.
Her man-made doctrines would come. You know what I say? I say let it crumble. If this truth interrupts your theological train of thought, I suggest there's something wrong with your theological train of thought. I suggest that if this truth does not fit your doctrine, I say you trash the doctrine, not the truth. This is God talking here.
Makes sense to me.
I second that.
This is God talking here. And I'm saying this is proof. I got to get a drink of water. Hang on a second. Galileo was a scientist who said no. He studied this and said no, objects of different weights will fall at the same velocity. And they said no, that's heretical. And you see, back then, if you taught against the accepted scientific doctrine, you were a heretic and you were drawn and quartered. And that made it kind of difficult to walk home. Yahoo! And nobody wanted to go against the accepted scientific. So Galileo, he had the audacity to take a group of scientists to the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I'm not sure how far it was leaning back in those days. I think it was still leaning. And he had bowling balls up there. No, I don't know what he had. He had balls of differing weights. And the scientific community was gathered. I read this in an article. The scientific community was gathered below. And down came those balls, and they fell as one at the feet of the scientific community. And the article I read stated that the accepted scientific theories were so strong and so widely accepted that the men could not even believe their own eyes. And having seen that demonstration, I think they went home wishing they hadn't.
I'll bet they were tongue-tied, drawn by their conclusions. I want you to listen to the song by Nicole Nordeman because it talks about that very subject of educated, self-inflated Pharisees like me. That's Wide-Eyed by Nicole Nordeman from her CD entitled Wide-Eyed 1998. I forgot he was created in the image of my God.
Beautiful again.
Mike, we're looking at the word bara in the Hebrew Scriptures, in a critical passage, Isaiah 45:7, where God says, I create evil. And we've discovered through tracing that throughout its occurrences, several key occurrences in the Scriptures, that he means what he says, created. And for a scholar to say that this carries the idea of allowed in Isaiah 45:7, I mean, to make that irrational of a claim, you must have a serious theological bias to protect. There's something working on you that's not letting you see the obvious here in Isaiah 45:7, and that something I will call a theological bias of disassociating God from evil because of the thinking that perhaps evil is sin. But there's the idea where people take their assumptions into the Scriptures. That's a bad thing to do. I say just go into the Scriptures raw. Go into the Scriptures naked, ready to be changed. Ready to be changed, see, by the Word. Let the Word change you. Don't come into the Scriptures thinking to change the Word. And that's just what theologians do here when they say that God allows evil. They've changed the wonderful word bara. I'd like to get into the word evil now. It's not going to take as long, but just quickly, the Greek word, or I should say the Hebrew word here rendered evil, and I create evil, is ra. Simple word, R-A. And the King James translators is marvelously consistent here. I'm thankful for that. They translated this word ra 444 times it was translated evil. And evil means to break, dismantle, or shatter. It carries no moral bias. And man, we told everybody we were going to give them proof of that, and I wonder if we'll get to it. Maybe we will. If not, we're here tomorrow night, and we're going to be on for 4 weeks after that. But 444 times the word's translated evil, and they kept that here. Now, not all translations of the Scriptures have been this consistent. We see theological biases coming out even in some translations. For instance, the New International Version, the NIV, they translated this Hebrew word ra 190 times. How do I know that? Well, I have the NIV concordance. See, you can buy these at your Christian bookstore. You can be like the Bereans. Check up on these guys. They translated it 190 times evil. But all of a sudden, they got to Isaiah 45:7, and they do this. Get this. NIV, Isaiah 45:7. I form light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. Now, why did they do that? Why didn't they be like the King James guys and just bring it over like they did every other place?
Were they
Evil.
putting up a shield, a hedge around God?
No, well, they were trying to be God's, they were trying to be God's public relations people. They're going to help God out because, see, they're assuming that evil is sin. So we can't say evil here. They're bringing their assumption to the translating table.
By the way, they can
and
call us.
And that's a bad thing to do.
At 1-888-281-1110, anybody who is a translator of the NIV.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And
the
if there are NIV
A
translators,
defender of the NIV can call us up.
well, we'd like to hold them accountable.
Sure.
Not responsible, but accountable.
Right. We want to hold them accountable. Why did they translate it this way? Because they thought that evil had a moral tinge, so they changed it to disaster.
Of course, that's an assumption. We really don't know their motives. That's just an assumption.
Well, I think I can safely assume that their motive was trying to protect God from what they thought was a moral association with the word evil, and which we will prove, just like we just proved that God meant create when he said create. We can prove that there's no moral tinge with the word evil.
We have somebody on that wants to
Okay,
make a comment.
I got to come back to this after the call. Yeah, let's take the call.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You're on the air, Greg and Wyndham. Welcome to Grace Cafe.
Good evening. How are you?
Hey, Greg, good. How are you doing?
I'm doing real well. I just wanted to call and give my support and say that I'm enjoying what I can get tuned in on the radio. I have difficulty getting it to come in real clear, but I've enjoyed what I've heard.
That's good to hear. That's encouraging. Thanks.
Okay. There's just one thing I would like to say. I mean, I can't quite get everything that you've been saying there this evening, but I'd just like to say that we do have a lot of freedom in Christ's death, and I've been reading some passages here in Romans 6, and where it talks about Christ's death, burial, and resurrection, and being baptized into his death gives me the freedom from being a slave to sin, and now in Christ's righteousness. And I think that's a wonderful thing, and a new perspective at looking at it, that we're not living under the law anymore.
Right. Right. So you're saying that you see what we're saying about that the evil was necessary in order to reveal Christ.
Right. Absolutely. I think right from the Garden of Eden, and even before that, needed a backdrop so that we could see what Christ is actually doing through it, or what God's doing through his Son.
That's it.
Death, burial, and resurrection. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that.
That's it.
That knowledge and that perspective.
You've got it.
Right. Jay, it's beautiful because it all comes back to what God is doing through his Son and what he has done on the cross.
We got to keep bringing it back to the cross. So I appreciate your comments there about bring us back to Christ, because that's what this is all pointing to. That's the outcome.
Thank you so much, Greg.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Greg.
And
Bye-bye.
for freedom,
Yeah,
Christ frees
right.
us.
Christ frees us. That's just a wonderful thing. So going back to the word, so they translate it disaster. They felt that was safer, but really, in essence, now, what's the difference? I mean, it's pretty serious enough to say God creates disaster. You see what I'm saying? Is an earthquake a disaster? I mean, even the insurance companies acknowledge that.
Yeah. Act of
They
God.
call it an act of God. Well, does the earthquake kill people? Does the earthquake ruin some people's day? Does it do terrible things with their dishes on the shelves? You see what I'm saying? It goes down the line. The earthquake still kills, but somehow we're working hard to disassociate God from his own creation. So we say, well, he can create the disaster, but he's not responsible for what happens. I mean, that's insane. That's like a guy in court saying, I didn't do it. I didn't shoot the guy. The bullet did. I just pulled the trigger. The bullet did it. No, this is cause and effect. It's cause and
Well,
effect.
I think people are going to want to know what role Satan has to play.
What role Satan has to play? Well,
He's got a role.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, we have a definite
We're going to do that.
intermediary.
We're going to do that. Maybe not tonight, but
When we come back.
When we come
Maybe.
back, we'll talk and discuss more on the subject of evil. Thanks for staying with us. You can call right after the break.
We're going to have more interesting talk right after this break. We're going to break away about 3 minutes, so stay tuned, okay?
When your kids head off to school or college, are they prepared when educators challenge their faith? Evolution is taught.
I decided to make a video tonight in my backyard because I want to talk to you in the dark. That's the door to my laundry room back there. But I really have a problem with evil. And some days, I guess, it bothers me less than other days. But I think it gets under my skin. And I think that it bothers me more than I really realize. Romans 8 says that all creation groans for the manifestation of the sons of God. And it says that we ourselves groan. And I think that the corporate pain of humanity, I think I'm sensitive to that. And Paul says that even though our outward man is decaying, and it is, my outward man is decaying, your outward is decaying, he says, nevertheless, the inward man is being renewed day by day. And I'm finding that that is something I have to accept completely by faith, that my inward man is being renewed. Because, folks, I usually don't feel it. And it's at times like these that I really have to remember that I'm to walk by faith and not perception. I have a friend who's in jail by the name of James Flanders. You all know him. He's up for manslaughter. And I can't imagine being in jail. And I'm suffering because my brother is in jail. And I almost feel like I'm in jail with him. And it's hard for me to enjoy everything that life has to offer. I mean, here I am in South Florida, you know, with palm trees and an ocean nearby. And people think I ought to be inexpressibly happy. And if you take my blessings into account, yeah, I would have to agree that I should be. But I'm not. So that makes me wonder if there's a difference between happiness and joy, if there's a difference between the outward man decaying and the inward man being renewed. And I think there has to be a difference. There's obviously a difference. It's just that some days I can't tap into it. It reminds me of a line from a Woody Allen movie, Annie Hall. In Annie Hall, Woody Allen says something like, he says, most people are simply miserable. And then you have the pathetically miserable. He says, so you're lucky if you're just miserable. So it's all relative, isn't it? And I know that not everybody feels like me. I meet people all the time who don't feel like me. And they're unbelievers. So the perplexing thing to me is, how is it that the unbelievers seem to be happy and content and flying along in life, going downhill, seem to have the wind at their back, and I feel like I'm bearing the weight of the misery of humanity. I think that's what's stopping me from what the world would term happiness. I'm trying to find an excuse for it, and all I can do is go to Scripture. As I'm speaking to you, another line of Paul's comes to mind, where he says he has unintermittent pain in his heart for his brethren according to flesh, who are the Jews. Now, his brethren and sistren, obviously, their hearts have been hardened. He's speaking of this in Romans 9, 10, and 11, and he admits the fact that God himself is the one who hardened his brethren and his sistren. So I think the knowledge that God is responsible for that must be the thing that causes his inner man to be renewed. But it's this outward man that's decaying that's hard to deal with. And in fact, I grapple with it, and I'm grappling with it now. I remember when the space shuttle exploded in 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger. And 4, 5, 6 astronauts were killed. Not instantly. No, the crew capsule survived. And if you watch slow motion video of the explosion, you can actually see the crew capsule, and it's intact. And it took them, I think, 6 or 7 minutes to fall to the Atlantic Ocean, which is right over here, right over there. So you have to wonder what they're thinking as they're heading down to the surface of the water, which at that speed would be like hitting concrete. I was depressed for like 2 weeks after that. Here's why I'm mentioning that. That's just one example of the pain and anguish and the agony that a handful of people suffered for a period of 6 minutes. Now let us consider the corporate suffering of humanity that has endured for 6,000 years. That gets to me. And I credit it, or debit it, as the case may be, to this. Actually, I will have to say I debit it to the Spirit of God in me. Because you notice Paul also says, I think it's in Romans 8, that the Spirit of God makes intercession for us with inarticulate groanings. Now, why does it say that the Spirit groans? It's a strange thing for this pure thing, which is the power of God. It's a strange thing that the Spirit of God is said to groan. So I'm wondering now, if it's good enough for the Spirit of God, why isn't it good enough for me? Well, Paul says it is good enough for us in Romans chapter 8. We ourselves groan within ourselves for what? For the deliverance. For the deliverance of what? Our bodies. The outward man that is decaying. Because you see, my inner man has already been delivered. I realize every day that I've been delivered from sin and death. That's not lost on me. I'm not sitting here telling you that what I know can flit away or evaporate like snowflakes in Fort Lauderdale. I'm not saying that. It's there. But there's another place where Paul says that the spirit and the flesh lust against one another. The spirit, of course, lusts for life. The flesh lusts for death. It doesn't lust for death. Well, maybe it does lust for death. I think many of us, if we were honest, would have to say that since we don't fear death anymore, that death is sometimes an attractive option, because we all know that death is the cessation of consciousness, the cessation of thinking about the evil in the world, thinking about our personal evil, thinking about the evil that happens to our loved ones. Do you sometimes feel that I was almost going to say I shouldn't feel this way, but if I feel this way, I feel this way. I just feel sometimes that so many bad things can happen to my loved ones and to me personally. And this is a thought that can induce panic. I have to drive it away when it comes to me. I have to push it away. This is the wrestling match that the spirit has with the flesh, and we're not immune to it. Oh no. Just because we're believers doesn't mean we're immune to this wrestling match. If we were changed, if we were spiritual beings, then we wouldn't have that wrestling match. But Paul says first the soulish, afterwards that which is spiritual. So we're still wrestling with the soul that belongs to this body. Now, our soul's going to be saved when our body's saved. No worries about that. I guarantee you that's going to happen. Don't take my word for it. Jesus Christ talked about the salvation of the soul, and the soul is saved along with the body. So once our bodies are transformed and made immortal, the soul's going to go right along with it, and you're not going to have this wrestling. You're not going to have this tug of war between thoughts of impending doom and thoughts of impending deliverance. Isn't that strange? Doom and deliverance, they both begin with D. But they operate side by side in this existence that we call life. I don't like it. And yet I'm stuck with it, and so are you. So I thought that maybe by sitting here outside smoking a cigarette and talking about it, we can share this. I can share it with you, and you can sit there on the other side of this video and say, yeah, I feel that way too. I'm kind of hoping that you do. Well, I don't have to hope. I've talked to you. We email each other. And I know you're going through the same thing. And it should comfort you as it comforts me to think that Paul, our apostle, the most knowledgeable man about this evangel, he also suffered similarly. Not only in himself with the groaning that I just talked about in Romans chapter 8, but that unintermittent pain. Did you hear that? Unintermittent. That means it never stopped. If you have your windshield wipers on and you have them on intermittent, it means they just go once in a while. You can set it for 1 second or 2 seconds if it's a light rain, but if it's a heavy rain, you just let them go. Unintermittent pain is pain that does not stop. And our apostle, who knew everything about our calling, our future, he had unintermittent pain in his heart. So I think it's time to forgive ourselves if we too feel unintermittent pain. Because if it's good enough for the apostle of grace, it's good enough for us.